We're in Daniel chapter 6. We're in the last, how do I put this? We're in the last chapter that makes any sense of Daniel. Like that's, listen, the last few chapters, but there's been some very interesting things, and it's in this story is pretty. It's good. It's a good story. It's encouraging, and I hope that this is a good sermon based off of it. You know, we go week to week. We don't know around here, right? But it's next week we get into the visions of Daniel, and that's when yours truly here has to really do the homework and really make that kind of interesting. And we've been working on that, and the visions are fascinating. It's apocalyptic stuff. So get ready for that. But today we're doing Daniel chapter 6. And this is kind of like the quintessential Daniel story. This is Daniel and the lion's den. It's great. I mean, everyone learned this story growing up. It was in all of the children's books. It was in all the stuff, right? That it's one of the first stories that you know that Daniel was a good guy, and they threw him into the lion's den, and he popped out in the morning again. He's like, I'm fine, right? That's kind of the story. But there's a lot of cool things going on here in Daniel. A lot of interesting stuff. So, come on, I'm trying to stall as much as I can, and my phone is not allowing such a thing. I'll just begin. So it's this Daniel chapter 6. It's a really cool story, and what I want you to see what I want you to see when you read is. There is another biblical story that sounds extremely similar to Daniel in the lion's den. And I'm going to be hinting at that, and you'll probably pick it up pretty quickly. And for those of you that were in Sunday school, don't ruin it for the people around you. Like that, it's over there. But it's really cool. And you should probably come to Sunday school. You get to go into the deep dive, right? And we have a good time in that class. Also, Thursday, we have Thursday morning Bible reading at 11 o'clock. 11 a.m. on Thursday mornings. You should come to that too. I know you're probably like, Bible reading? That sounds boring. Listen, we listen to it. I have a dramatized version of the Bible, which is actually good. It's the best one that I've heard. And it's so good that I really don't like the New King James Version of the Bible, and we use that one in that class. But we listen to large swaths of Scripture, and we talk about it. And it's amazing what happens when you read large amounts of Scripture. You remember back in the day, no one could read, right? Literacy was not a big thing. And so everyone heard it. And that's how everyone wrote back then, was to hear it. And it's amazing what happens when you listen to it and can hear it and then talk about it. So I encourage you to come at 11 a.m. on Thursdays too. There's my ads. In order to talk about Daniel chapter 6, we really need to go to Mark chapter 8. We really need to hit there first. So Mark chapter 8 is a story, it's pretty well known. It's where Jesus comes up to his disciples and goes, hey guys, who do people say that I am? And some of the disciples are like, well, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, some say some of the other prophets. And then he looks at them and goes, but who do you say that I am? And Peter then, you know Peter then puffs himself up and it says, you're the Christ. You're the Messiah. You're the one that's here to save us, right? Christ and Messiah is the same word, but Messiah is Hebrew, Christ is Greek, all right? So Christ and Messiah is the same word. He's like, you're the Messiah. You're the one that's come here to save us. And Jesus is like, good job, but don't say anything, all right? And Peter's like, yes, that's right. I answer all the questions. You know, he bragged about it to everyone else. In fact, later on in the story, they brag to each other, but about how holy and how good they are. So he brags about how good he is, and then Jesus keeps on going though. And Jesus says, all right, well, you got that. Then he starts saying that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And then it says this in Mark. He said this plainly. He said this clearly. That way that even the dead among you could understand what he was saying. He's like, listen to me. Scribes, Pharisees, all these big important people are going to reject me and try to kill me, and they are going to be successful, but I will rise again. Peter then went and grabbed Jesus. And have you ever had that friend that you're like in a party and you're talking to the friend and your friend talking to other people, and then that friend says something that's just wildly offensive to the entire room? Have you guys ever happened to that? I must have had weird friends growing up. Or maybe I have weird friends now. and so anyway, so it's like Peter then grabbed Jesus and took him, like when you grab that friend and you take him over to the corner of the room. It's like, what are you doing, man? Don't say stuff like that. That's ridiculous. You can't say things like that. And he's basically saying, cool it, Jesus. You're not going to die. I just said that you're the Christ, that you're the Messiah. I just said this about you. Play it cool, man. These people are all here to see you. And Jesus pushes back and uses his outside voice and says to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. Think about that. So Peter was just like, that's right, you're the Christ, I got it right. And then immediately afterwards, Jesus is calling him the accuser. He's calling him Satan. That's a hot and cold thing going on right in a row, right? It's like a gut punch. And he calls him, get behind me, Satan. And then he explains why he's doing that. It's because for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but you're just focusing on yourself. You're focusing on your own power, on your own goodness, on your own whatever you want to call it. You're focusing on what your wants and desires for who I am is, rather than letting this play out. And then he said, he called to all the disciples, and he said, if anyone would come after me, if anyone wants to follow in my footsteps, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Forever who would save his life is going to lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake and the good news, that's what gospel means, and the good news will save it. This is the heart of the Christian message, is that we as Christians would trust God enough that we'd be able to deny ourselves and follow him. It's the same thing going on in Daniel chapter 6, where we see somebody, Daniel, is able to trust God so much that he can deny himself and follow Jesus. That's what's going on in Daniel. And you can probably see the way we're going in this sermon, which is good. So Daniel, we see what we saw last week is that Babylon had become a shell of its previous glory, and it was taken over by the Medes and the Persians. Basically, we know them as the Persians. We know him from that. And Daniel, is still amazing at his job. Remember, he was amazing when he was with the Babylonians too. Remember, he kept rising up to the top. And here, it's no different. Even in the Persians, the king sees Daniel. He's like, man, this guy Daniel's got it going on. He's smart. He's good looking. He may be older now, but everything is going really well for Daniel. And he raises him up, and the king ends up saying, man, Daniel's so good at this that perhaps I should make him, he should just run everything. He basically should be the king, right? Like, it's like the king's like, I'll still be the king, but he can just run everything. He can do the job over there. Like, that sounds incredible, but there's a problem. His little minions, the people underneath the king who are seeing Daniel, they look at him, and now you got to read between the lines, but I think we can get there, right? Like, they don't like Daniel. They're like, what's this Hebrew, what's this foreigner here doing? He's going to be basically running everything. They're like, that's what's supposed to be my job. I did everything right. I had the right dad. I had the right mom. I have the right everything. I went to the right schools. I did all the right things. And here's this guy who we conquered, who Babylon conquered, and we just accepted him in. Like that doesn't seem fair. Right? And these guys, these scribes and the satraps and all these things, they try to trap Daniel. Even though Daniel hasn't done anything wrong, they're just jealous of him, and they try to trap him. All right, point number one. Well, not point number one, but does this sound familiar? Where an innocent guy comes walking in, and the scribes and the Pharisees and all of that are jealous of him and his crowds, and they want to trap him? Yeah. You're seeing it. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? So they realize that the only way is to trap him against his own religious laws. So they go up to the king and they work out a plan, and they're like, this king of ours is gullible. Let's play off of his gullibility and make something that really works for ourselves. And so they go up to him and it's like, "Oh, king, may you live forever." That's a direct quote. They say that. They're like, "Oh, king, may you live forever. We have the best idea you've ever heard. We want September to be King Darius month, right? And we want this, and we want everyone to bow down before you. We want everyone to see your power and glory and all of that, and that they wouldn't bow down to anything else except for you during the month of September. We will call it Darius," right? Like, and it'll be great. And the king's like, I really like it when people bow down to me. It really makes me feel good on the inside. And he's like, okay. They didn't realize that they were trying to trap Daniel, and so they go forward with their plan. They sign it into law, and that month comes up, and Daniel sees what they're doing. And it says this in Daniel chapter 6, verse 10. It says, "And when Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had the windows in his upper chamber open towards Jerusalem, and he got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God." Now, did he start doing this just when this happened? He's like, I'm going to show them, I'm going to bow down before God. No. Did he pray less? No. He just continued living his life the way he had been this whole time. He didn't stop anything. He just continued as he had done previously. Let's talk about this for a second. It's 30 days. Now, imagine if someone came up to you, they're like, I'm going to cut off your foot or something, I don't know. I'm going to do something to you. I'm going to throw you into somewhere. That's mean to say. I was going to say, I'm not even going to say that. I'm going to make you live somewhere where you don't want to live for a month, as long as you pray or something like that. If you do that, like that's we look at it and we're like, oh, okay, like it's only 30 days. Like, surely God would forgive me for watching over my own life for 30 days. It's just 30 days. Like, you can go without things for 30 days for a lot of it. Like, you can do the most crazy diet you've ever heard of for 30 days. It might be difficult, but you could do it, right? Like there are diets out there that say that all you need to do is get your nutrients from the air. That's a whole nother world of understanding that I don't understand. But for 30 days, you could probably do it, right? Like you could almost do anything for 30 days. This isn't an unheard of amount of time. They're not going from all time you can only pray to King Darius. They're just saying 30 days. That's all they're saying. But Daniel just continues to go forward. Like, I'm not sure if I would have that same kind of charisma or ability as Daniel, where I think I would be able to work up a good biblical solution to get me out of this current stickiness, right? I would be able to quote and make it, all this stuff, but maybe I would be using the Bible for my own advantage in that case. Maybe I'd be making the Bible and the scriptures into what I want them to say. And maybe the church then, I have to be up here and I got the dress on and all that up front, but maybe it's like, you know what? It's funny you guys say that, but Coley and I just booked a cruise for, it's weird, 4 weeks. All of a sudden, my attendance may become suspect during this time. It's not that long of a time, and yet Daniel stays faithful all the way through. It's easy for us to say, I'll just get back to this. But Daniel keeps praying, just as he had done previously. He trusts God so much that he's able to deny himself and follow God, trusting that God will work it out. That's an in-depth faith. That he's trusting that no matter how it rolls, that it'll be okay. That's incredible. That's incredible. And I would hope that I'm somewhere near that. Well, so getting back to the story, the king's trapped. He knows Daniel is innocent. And he's worried. He can't go to sleep. He can't do anything. And they bring him. I'm sorry. I'm ahead of myself. And so as they bring him to the lion's den, Daniel's brought and he's cast in the lions, and the king yells down. And I think this is fascinating. The king yells down, "May your God, whom you serve continually, may it deliver you, Daniel." May this God who you prayed to, may he continue to deliver you. And right after here, do you know what it says? I should have put it on the screen, but I didn't. It says, and the stone was rolled over the den, and it was sealed. Does that sound like anything? That's almost a little too blatant, isn't it? It's like, come on, like someone's plagiarizing someone else here, right? It's almost too blatant. The stone was rolled in front of it. It's what it says right after this, right after verse 10. And so Daniel, through all this, trusts in God so much that he's able to deny himself and follow him. Notice Daniel doesn't fight. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't go, "It was those guys over there. They're just trying to trap me." He doesn't pick it outside and say, "Bow before God alone or this whole place will burn." He doesn't do any of that. He just simply trusts and serves. He's worked himself up to where he's the highest of the height because the whole time he's trusts and he's served. And he just continues to go. He trusts and he serves. Even the king realizes the law is dumb and he wants him alive. But Daniel keeps serving the third commandment, where he says no other God, where he's trusting in God alone. He trusts God so much that even though he's thrown in the lion's den, he knows that God will work it out. I would love if that testimony would be about my life. I would love that testimony of Daniel to be about everyone that is here. I would love and trust that we would all love and trust so much in what God has done for us all that we would not even see the need to complain or cause a ruckus. But that we could just be faithful enough that no matter what would happen, we would know that God is going to work it out. That we would trust the God enough that we could deny ourselves and follow Him. Like that's you see, that's the Christian way, that we would deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow Him. But the thing is that's the way that God has always been. That's been God's people's way. I mean, think about Abraham. How God asked him, it's like, listen, you know how you wanted that heir so bad? You know how you wanted to be this great, I promised it should be this great nation, and now you have this one son? I want you to give me that son back. And Abraham, probably begrudgingly, puts the fire on Isaac's back and makes him climb that mountain all the way up. Like, you see the story? Abraham trusts in God so much that he knows that even if his son was to die under his knife, he knows that God could even raise the dead. Right? Like, so, I mean, and that's the whole thing with Jacob too. That Jacob, all he did was fight and fight and fight. I know I say this all the time, but for those of you that named your child Jacob, or if your name is Jacob, I'm sorry. It's not a good name. It means you're a jerk. Like, that's just what it means. That's what the name means. Like, that's all. It's not me. That's the Bible. Like, literally in Hebrew, it means heel grabber. Like, and that's what, it means heel grabber. It means like someone, it literally means when you're swimming in the pool and you have that one friend and you're trying to barely swim and he grabs your foot and pulls you down and you feel like you're drowning. Like, you know that friend? Like, that's Jacob, right? That's Jacob. Like, that's what that means. It's not a good name. It's a fine name. My nephew's named is Jacob. He's got a thing that I made that's in Hebrew. It says Jacob and written in Hebrew right above his bed. Like, it's a fine name, but not really. Don't listen to me. I'm just trying to make it nicer than it is. Because this guy Jacob fought and fought and fought and fought and fought his entire life until he saw God and he knew his brother was going to kill him across the river, so much so that he's bribing him with everything that he owns. And then he meets God and he even fights God. And it's not till God wrenches his hip out of him that he finally releases and goes, fine. He's fine. He knows that God will work it out. Like, this is not just the story of Christians, but this is the story of God's people all throughout the scriptures. Is that they stop. They trust in God so much that they know that God will work it out. That He will work it out in the end. And it's a beautiful message. And what we end up seeing is that this king ends up, like, he runs to the lion's den in the morning. What? Hold on, that sounds familiar too. You hear it? This king, he doesn't really wake up. He never really went to sleep. But he gets up early in the morning. He sees the sun. He's like, all right, I can go now. And he runs, just like the women to the tomb, right? And he yells down to Daniel, you okay, buddy? And I picture that Daniel goes, "O king, live forever. I'm all right. I'm all right. My God watched out for me." And there's this benediction that the king says at the end of Daniel, that he says, this loving God of Daniel's should be revered for all the signs and wonders and how he rescues us all. And that's how the narrative portion of Daniel ends. We see how the power of God delivers God's people. And we see this all through the story of God's people in the scriptures. And we see that this is how God works. It's not these little instances where God all of a sudden steps in and he's like, oh, I'll save you guys today. And then he steps out and he's like, no more, right? Like over there. This is how God works. This is how he always worked. This is how God's people have always worked. That his people would love and trust in him, that they would trust in his love and care for them, that they would be able to deny themselves and follow him. And we finally see by Jesus is that is not just the story of God's people, but that's the story of God himself, where he loves us so much that he denied himself so that we would never be far from him. God is for you. Just like he's for Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, even Saul, right? Daniel. He's for you. Be full of his power and spirit and bodily deny yourself and follow him.